Have you ever wondered what it really feels like when a government decides that the truth is dangerous? I'm not talking about censorship or surveillance, we've all heard of that. I'm talking about a world where a simple whisper, a joke, or even silence can land you in a prison so brutal, so soul-crushing, it doesn't even need walls to keep you trapped. The Gulag Archipelago by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn isn't just a book, it's a cry from the depths of human suffering, a testimony of one man who dared to pull back the curtain on one of the most terrifying systems of oppression in modern history. And trust me, once you hear this, you won't look at history or humanity the same way again. So here's where it starts. It's not a dramatic midnight arrest with helicopters or explosions. It's quiet. It's ordinary. You're walking home from work, thinking about dinner, maybe about your kids, and suddenly, someone taps your shoulder. Men in coats. No explanation. No questions. Just, come with us. That's it. No one screams. No one resists. But because everyone already knows, this is the Soviet Union under Stalin, and when the state comes for you, resistance is suicide. This is what happened to Solzhenitsyn himself. A decorated officer in the Red Army, loyal to his country, and yet arrested for writing a few lines criticizing Stalin in a private letter. That's all it took. But let me tell you something surprising. This isn't just a personal story. It's a massive, sprawling account of millions of lives crushed, erased, or turned into ghosts within a hidden empire of prison camps. Solzhenitsyn calls it the archipelago because these camps are like islands scattered across the Soviet Union, isolated but connected by a single, invisible sea, fear. And navigating the sea? That's where things get really interesting. Imagine a world where laws are meaningless, where guilt is assumed and innocence is irrelevant. People are arrested without explanation, sometimes for things as absurd as owning a foreign newspaper or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The interrogations are long and brutal, often lasting for days without sleep. Techniques range from psychological manipulation to outright torture. You're forced to confess to crimes you didn't commit, name friends who aren't guilty, destroy lives just to survive. And here's the twist. Most people do confess. Not because they're guilty, but because the system is designed to break you. There's no justice, only quotas. Officers had arrest targets. Think about that. Your life could be destroyed because someone needed to meet a number on a spreadsheet. Now here's what's fascinating and honestly disturbing. The people running this machine weren't monsters. They were bureaucrats. Ordinary people doing a job. Solzhenitsyn forces us to ask, what would we do if we were on either side? What if you were the prisoner? What if you were the interrogator? The judge? Could you stand up against it? Or would you rationalize, keep your head down, just follow orders? The scariest part is realizing how easy it is to slip into complicity when fear runs the show. And then there are the camps themselves, labor camps, spread across the freezing wilderness of Siberia. These weren't just prisons, they were places designed to crush the soul. Prisoners worked for 12, 14, 16 hours a day in unbearable cold, building railways, cutting timber, mining, starving on rations that could barely keep a child alive. People froze to death, collapsed from exhaustion, and were replaced without a second thought. No names, just numbers. And yet, in the darkest of places, something almost unthinkable happened. Some found a strange kind of freedom, not from the camp, but within themselves. Solzhenitsyn describes fellow prisoners who refused to betray others, who chose to suffer rather than become part of the system. There's this one moment that stuck with me. A prisoner is being beaten during interrogation, and the officer demands a confession. The man simply looks up and says, "You have no power over my soul." In that moment, Solzhenitsyn realized that true strength doesn't come from weapons or governments. It comes from the refusal to lie. From the courage to hold on to truth, even if it costs everything. And let me be honest, this book isn't easy to read. Not because it's boring or confusing, but because every page is heavy. Every story cuts deep. Solzhenitsyn doesn't just tell you what happened. He makes you feel it. The hunger, the loneliness, the cold, the constant fear that tonight might be your last. But he also gives us something else, clarity. He shows how a society can slide into tyranny not all at once, but step by step, compromise by compromise, lie by lie. And that's the warning. This isn't just about Soviet Russia. It's about any system that puts power over people, ideology over truth, obedience over conscience. What's wild is that Solzhenitsyn risked everything to write this. He hid parts of the manuscript across the country. He memorized entire chapters in case the KGB found the papers. One of the women helping him was arrested and committed suicide so she wouldn't be forced to betray him. This wasn't just literature, it was an act of war against lies. And it worked. When the Gulag Archipelago was finally published, it sent shockwaves around the world. The Soviet regime tried to silence it, but the truth had already escaped. And here's something I keep thinking about. Solzhenitsyn once said, "The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." That line, it's in all of us. We like to think we'd be heroes in a moment of crisis. But what happens when that crisis doesn't come with a clear villain or a dramatic showdown? What if it comes quietly, in small moments, when you're asked to stay silent, to look away, to compromise just a little? Would we have the courage to say no? Now here's the thing. This story isn't just about prisons and punishment. It's about memory. About whether we choose to remember what really happened, or bury it because it's too uncomfortable to face. Solzhenitsyn could have walked away after surviving the camps. He could have moved on, lived a quiet life. But instead, he turned himself into a vessel for millions of voices that had been silenced. He said, if they are silent, it means they never existed. So he wrote with fire in his bones, not just to expose the system, but to make sure that the pain, the loss, the resilience, none of it would be forgotten. And the most haunting part? Many of the people he wrote about were never seen as victims in their own time. The world outside didn't always believe them. The Soviet regime painted prisoners as enemies of the people, traitors, spies, counter-revolutionaries. But most were ordinary citizens, teachers, farmers, engineers, students, people who spoke a little too freely or knew the wrong person. And in that silence, in that erasure, entire lives disappeared without a trace. Imagine being punished, then erased, like you never existed at all. But let me tell you something profound. Solzhenitsyn doesn't let this be a story of pure despair. There's a deep, almost spiritual undercurrent to his writing. He talks about suffering as a teacher. How, in the absence of comfort, truth becomes more vivid. He writes about prisoners who found meaning in pain, who discovered a kind of inner strength precisely because everything had been taken from them. In a way, he's saying something radical, that even in a system designed to dehumanize, there is a kind of freedom that no regime can touch. Not physical freedom, but moral freedom. The power to choose who you are, even when the world tries to define you. And maybe that's the most enduring part of this story. We usually think of power as something external, money, control, armies. But Solzhenitsyn flips that. He says real power is refusing to participate in the lie. Refusing to call evil good just because everyone else does. It's in choosing honesty over convenience, conscience over comfort. That's how tyranny falls, not when we fight it head-on, but when enough people quietly decide, I won't be part of this anymore. And think about it, this book wasn't just an exposé. It was a weapon, not with bullets or bombs, but with memory, testimony, and unflinching truth. It helped dismantle the illusion of a perfect socialist state. It cracked open the myth of utopia and showed the blood underneath. And all because one man refused to stay silent. Now, fast forward to today. You might be thinking, well, that was then. This could never happen now. But that's exactly the point. Solzhenitsyn's warning wasn't just about Stalin's Russia. It was about human nature. About how fear, ideology, and unchecked power can grow in any system. And if we don't protect the truth, if we don't speak up when it matters, it will grow again. Maybe not with gulags and barbed wire, but in other ways. Subtler ways. Ways that still destroy lives, just slower. So here we are. One book, one man, and a storm of truth that tore through a wall of lies. The Gulag Archipelago isn't easy to read. It isn't meant to be. But it's necessary. Because it forces us to ask the hardest questions, not about history, but about ourselves. Would we have the courage to stand up when it's dangerous? Would we hold on to truth when lies are easier? Would we protect our soul, even if it cost us everything? That's the heart of this story. Not just what happened, but what could happen again if we forget. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people remember, it won't. Feel like you're meant for more, but don't know how to get there? You're not alone. Every success story starts with doubt and a spark. The Self-Made Millionaire, Zero to Wealth isn't just a book. It's your roadmap to purpose, confidence, and success, built on real lessons from real millionaires. One reader said, "It didn't feel like a book. It felt like my future talking to me." Inside, you'll find the exact mindset and principles used by the world's most successful people. No fluff, just real, life-changing wisdom. Ready to take the first step? Get it 100% free. Just subscribe and comment "book" below.